So this is part two of our conversation that we started at 3 o'clock. If you're new to this, I'm going to really quick overview where we've gone, and then we're just going to continue the conversation.
Yeah.
So, quick intro. I'm Dr. Deborah Vinall, psychologist, marriage and family therapist, and author. I write mental health musings. We're with John Rinaldo, who writes the Positive 10 here on Substack, and we're talking about parental alienation and estrangement. In the first part of the video, which if you didn't see, you can go back and you'll find it later on our pages. But we talk a little bit about what parental alienation is and estrangement and the impacts on kids and the impacts on parents. And then John was generously sharing his story, his personal experience with this and how it impacted him and his kids who were 4, 7, and 8, I believe, when it all began.
Yeah.
And how you kind of moved through this really, really painful place to, you were starting to tell us how you managed to move into a place of finding some peace and getting to the place you are right now, where you really focus on trying to make the world a better place to those around you. So
I try.
So you had just said something about going to a psychologist and burn through your life savings on lawyers and reading a book about somebody who had been through this situation. And go ahead and pick up the story there, please.
Yeah, so it was the summer of 2018. We had a huge, just kind of recap for those. There was a huge 2 incidences that involved my daughter and my son, and there was sexual content about that. And I don't want to get too dived into that, but what happened was something happened, and I was dwelling on, do I report it, don't report it? And then I went to the schools, and they reported it, and then it just went from there, snowball. As we ended up to a psychologist, I was reading a book at the same time, and the psychologist deemed we're not worthy as parents, or the kids were, it was so toxic that he said it was so toxic that he is surprised the kids weren't so acting out more in the situation. And I was kind of like sitting there, and they thought that the kids said obviously they wanted to stay with their mother, and that's because I lived in an apartment and the mother had the family home, which they always would favor the family home because that's what they're used to. And it didn't matter how close I was; it was always deemed to be, it was always the cards were on her favor and whatever, and I wasn't that part. But, a lot of things were happening, and as I was reflecting and just kind of like sitting there, and I was dealing with my health, I was dealing with a whole bunch of stuff, and a lot was coming down hard. And as I was navigating through that, I started to realize that fighting for 50-50 or fighting for my kids was the wrong approach.
It was harming them where you were trying to love them.
Yeah. And I remember recalling my attorney. I says, I want this to be the last bill that you ever bill me because I'm so tired of paying for you. And I said, it's not that you didn't do a good job. It's that I don't want to spend another dollar to you. I realize pay child support and just go from there. And she said, okay, what do you want to do? And I just said, give her this deal. And it's one and done. Every other weekend, maybe a Wednesday, and that's it. You have the kids full time, done. And I never forget the response I got from my wife.
Mm-hmm.
She goes, this is not what I wanted. And I was like, and my attorney called me up and she said, that's what she said. She said, this is not what she wanted. She wants to still have this 50-50. I says, the 50-50 doesn't work. The psychologist basically said that. It doesn't work. And what she wanted was the continuous chaos.
It's addicted to the chaos. So again, like I said earlier in part 1, so this isn't always about you, right?
Yeah.
So personal, like this, maybe this personality pathology. I don't know her, but there's something in her that the chaos and needed the fight. That's what she was used to or wanted.
Right. And there was another element in that whole situation. You see, I was the disciplinary. She was the fun person.
Mm.
And so anytime the kids had an issue with me, they would run to mom,
Mm.
and she'd be the hero.
Yeah.
And I became the villain and they became the victim in every single situation. So anytime there was always that triangle communication, which is a prime example of what parental alienations do. They
Mm.
always villainize the one and make the kids victims, and they become the hero and become this protector, which they're not really protecting. They're just trying to win at all cost.
Yeah.
And when you're winning at all costs, you're going to do behaviors of that. So she was losing the one control that she had was over me. Two, she was losing the capability of being this. Now she had to be the disciplinary person as well.
Mm.
So I'd forced that issue. So she had to rise up and become disciplinarian. And And I said, "No deal. I'm done. This is it. This is last chance. We're not talking more about this. I wanna move on. The kids need to have some type of stability, whatever that looks like." And then she finally accepted it, and we moved on. And then immediately I went into, had she took me to court again, and was she was when we went to court, it was always about child support. So anytime there was a little bit of money that I had, she went to child support. I remember I was spending close to $3,000 a month in child support, and that went on for a long time, and I was had the big bills, I had everything else going on, I was trying to keep a modest life, and the courts don't care. They don't care about that, they just look at the financial, they just say, "Here's the money, boom, boom, boom," and she was able to co figure she was able to kinda, like, pretend she didn't have to go to work full time and all this stuff, and so it cost me. And that's fine. I mean, I looked at it as I'd rather pay that than the attorney, and, um, and so there wasn't much after that, there wasn't much of that, but for me, I lost more of me through
Mm.
that year of 2019 yeah, it was 2019 that I went through even more of losses. That whole s that first half of the year was tons of losses. My father had stage 4 cancer, so I was flying back and forth. Uh, the fiance that I was moving in, so I lost my kids. My dad's having cancer. Um, the fiance, who I thought were going to get married and all that, decided to find another person, and they moved on, and they had avoidant issues, which again, you have to remember, I wasn't, I wasn't I wasn't healed enough to understand who I was as a person. So I was picking a person who had if when I saw the red flags earlier on, we would never have been together. So that whole thing, and then I became homeless again in that whole stretch. But, you know, out of all that, and that was a year of me asking for peace. So you have to be very careful what you ask, especially when you put that in the energy and
Mhm.
out in the universe. I got nothing but chaos, and I lost everything in between that whole moment of looking for peace. But
And you
what I
rebuilt your life. It was from the very, very bottom up.
yeah, so what I did do is I found myself. Now I remember this one point where I was lost and embarrassed and shamed because I lost everything in between. I drove this place, sat there. I have a picture of it still, thought of it, and there's a lot of thoughts in your head. And I didn't realize that 20% of people, men, commit suicide. And that
Unbelievable.
was that was crossing my mind. I was like thinking, should I do this because you're not worthy? You create too much shame. Your kids are embarrassed. You've did this, you did that. And I drove. into town and I got myself some water, some bottles of water, and I started giving out bottled water to the homeless.
Mm.
And I remember this one time I was sitting at the bench, gave the water, and you got to remember I'm broken too at this point, just waiting for an opportunity to find a home at that night, and I was waiting for a few phone calls to come back, and and this guy comes up and he says, "Do you want some crack?"
Mm.
And I was like, "What, crackers? I don't want crackers. Here's a bottle of water, right?" He goes, "No, crackers." And I said, "Well, no." And then I remember a physical hand and a no, and I don't know what that was, but like a hand on me and a
Mhm.
no, and I looked, there was nothing there, just something saying there was a no, right? And I said, "No, man, that's okay. I'm good." Got a phone call. My buddy said, "Hey, come over." My wife said, "Okay." So I got to spend 7 days there. And uh, um, that's when my life changed.
Mm. Wow. It's a true rock bottom transformation story.
Yeah.
So your darkest moment, you turned to helping others, and it seems like that has remained a guiding light for you in the 6 years since then.
Yeah. Yeah. So the beautiful part was I ended up going to now artistic wise, I'm not an artist at all.
You're right.
No, no, but I mean, like, I was not an artist, like, I was always an athlete, I always thought of myself as
Mhm.
a jock, guy's guy type thing,
Mhm.
men things, trucks, ooh, kind of type of stuff, um, and spent 7 days at this house trying to get myself together, and I started finding myself in R&B, and I got this place, and it was really cheap, and I got this move some of my stuff in there, and the lady there was an artist. Karen was an artist, and she was a painter. And I was sitting there going, "Oh, this is kinda cool." And I remember the first day that I went in there, and I said, "Karen, would I wanna paint." And she looked
Mhm.
at me and she says, "Have you painted before?" And I said, "Nope." And
Give refuge. Show me where to point it.
she was like, "Are you serious?" I said, "Yeah, I wanna paint. I just." She
Mm.
goes, "You never painted before?" I said, "No, I have no clue." And she goes, "Okay." And, she goes, "Do you have a painting that you wanna do?" And I gave her this picture of this sunset, and that was a symbol of my life starting then. And I wanted to paint this thing, and it was very beautiful. It was a sunrise and all this stuff, and she goes, "But you've never painted before." And I said, "I don't care, I just wanna paint." And she goes, "Okay, we're gonna paint." So we sat down, and within a couple hours, I painted this thing, and she looked at me and she goes, "Never stop painting ever again." So that was kinda cool.
Your heart was drawn towards something that you just intrinsically
Yeah,
sensed would be healing for you, but also there was a hidden gift that you had to
yeah,
discover.
yeah.
Mm.
Thank you. Yeah, it was, and then from there, I started painting almost every day as a
Mm.
therapy just to kinda get
Mm.
myself, to figure out.
Mm.
And through that process, the kids were at her house, and I was sort of, like, in between. I didn't feel comfortable. Like, I try to go see them, dad, obviously, dad's a loser, dad's this, so the kids kinda felt embarrassed for me,
Mm.
and I just kinda went, "Whatever." And then my next big momentum, pushing over the hump, and then eventually I found an apartment and all that, and I got to move in, and I started buying furniture and started all over again, and I remember in that whole moment, I said, "Never again."
Mm.
never again I would be myself in this situation. Never again I will be used the way I've been used or taken advantage the way I've been taken advantage. Never again of this, never again of that. And I kept this promise to myself over and over again. And I just should have just to build. And I was like, I'm better than this. Like I just kept, self-talking myself.
Mm.
And and I booked a flight to London
Hmm.
just like that. And
To explore or?
and I didn't and I found myself a cheap place. It was I mean, I wouldn't say it's cheap, but it was a motel, excuse me. It's like 40 nights a night, $40 40 pounds a night, I guess, and that was like the air flight was like 350. I didn't care, I just needed to go away, and I wanted to have a moment to myself, and people wanted to come with me, and I said, "No, this is a John's trip,
Mm.
just a solo trip." And I got in there, and, um and that was probably the best 7 days myself. I came back changed, and people I didn't wanna be with the same people anymore. I just kinda, like, changed, and I started focusing on John some more. I found solitude to be more where I was happier, and and then COVID hit, and that was that was the 3rd rebirth, because
Yeah.
now I
Yes,
was
it's an inward process.
yeah, now I was isolated. I had nobody to go to. I was stuck at home. And there were some other things going on, but I was stuck at home.
Mhm.
My I know my father died a year later, and mm, you know, people said COVID was wrong and all this stuff. I looked at it as it was one of the best medicines that I could ever had because it forced me to be myself, to be isolated, and that's when I started writing and painting and being artistic and finding my way. And I mean, people laughed at me when I posted some of my paintings and things like that, and my writing wasn't that great. I remember starting there, but I still started and I still did it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what's most important.
yeah. And the kids were, you know, the kids were estranged still. It was
Mhm.
tough. And that was you know, I think the biggest ones I really miss is my daughter. I mean, I miss my boys, but my daughter was a bigger one.
It's the different connection out there. Yeah.
You know?
Have you found that as you've done all this work on yourself, has that had any impact on your relationship with your kids, or is it pretty much they're not around, so they don't know your routine?
Um, so so my kids obviously have their own personalities, and they're obviously definitely influenced.
Mhm.
Um, so I had to seek somebody to help me out, figure myself out. And I reached out to a therapist, and one of the conditions I wanted is to be not hard on me, but just kind of like
Honest.
what's that? Honest
Honest.
and raw. I didn't want the fluff. I didn't want the terminologies. I didn't want to know the psychonaut whatever. And I think the one thing that kept bugging me the most was, why her, not me? You know, and
Like,
she
right, they
said,
probably do.
but
Yeah.
yeah, they chose her over me. And she said that, look, you could have had everything, but when someone has the circus and they live next to the circus and it's the circus all day long, your kids are going to go to the circus. There's nothing you can do about it. Doesn't matter. That's where they get the freedom. They know that she's gonna put the circus on, they're gonna be doing roller coasters and all that, and you're gonna be this person that's the steady Eddie. That's not gonna happen with these kids. These kids are gonna go in that direction. And so, I mean, that took some acceptance about my kids. And even though even the book, I reference back to the book, even in there, he said it takes time to accept what happens.
Yeah. And change and relationship change, they're lifelong processes.
Oh, yeah.
You can continue to focus on being the best you that you are while giving them the space, but also the open, like a door, not a locked door.
Right.
A door that they can come knock on or they can come enter, and you're there and available without crashing through theirs. And hopefully as they grow and mature and get more distance and more insight that children just are not capable of having when they're surviving this kind of chaotic environment.
And that's your point. They were surviving as well.
Yes. Yep.
Like,
Because you can't turn on the one who feeds you.
no. Yeah. But, so now, obviously, I have different relationships with all three of them. My oldest is at Pitt. And
they're all in their early 20s now, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They're pretty
And I remember my son coming out to me and he says, Dad, I was thinking going here. And don't get me wrong, our relationship, my oldest, was still very touch and go. It still is. It's a little touch and go. Anything will trigger like memories and things like that. He's going through his own process. But there's been some great strides with him. And I'm very grateful for those. And sometimes there's some back and a little bit of back, a little back, forward, but not like drastic. There's development, which is a positive direction.
good.
So I remember he coming up to me and said, Dad, I'm planning on going to school an hour away. And I said, that's not far enough.
Mm.
He goes, why is that? And I said, son, go to California, go to Florida, go to Texas, go somewhere and go enjoy your life. And I don't think it processed him. And then he found himself to be in Pittsburgh, which was, a good distance away. But he asked me why. And I said, well, your mom's going to be up there in an hour, anytime, any day, and she's going to live your life. Is that what you want? I said, nothing against it if that's what you want. But if you really want to find independence and true who you are, you need to move away from us and away from the chaos that you grew in, you were raised in. Because that's the only way you're going to learn who you are as a person.
And that's a truly supportive position to come from, where it's not, it's the opposite of what the dynamics behind parental alienation, where it's all about how can I use my kids to meet my needs,
right?
Them close through me, but you're saying, be you, be healthy, discover yourself in the world. And so that's such a gift to kids. So as we have just like a couple of minutes left before we hit the hour, what word of advice might you give to a parent who's still like really in the throes of this tug of war of parental alienation battles with their ex and over their children?
Yeah.
Not necessarily how to win the battle, but just
No, because you're not ever going to win that battle. It's you have to think of it as the person's winning at all cost, no matter what the damage is. They're fighting to win at all cost. It's an outlaw war.
Right. Like
What's that?
And nobody will win. Your kids lose,
No.
they lose. It's not, yeah.
So
Right.
yeah. But as soon as you start thinking that way, you start thinking how to, like, as soon as you start coming to that realization, now you understand where you're at.
Mhm.
And the self-development is really important. But also, if you think that they're winning at all costs, and I didn't do a really good job at this all the time because I was always distracted on things, is when you have your kids, put all your love in them. Like, make them your number one priority in your life. Don't worry about dating. Don't worry about this. Don't worry about the ex telling you that you're no good. Just focus on them. Make their lives better and better people every day. And I know that's hard to do during the storm because you will be in a hurricane. You're going to be in a hurricane 5 all the time in this situation. But the more times you stay in the present with them and be there for them, That's great. I mean, there's one person that says, "Well, you have to show up at every single game of your children." And I'm like, "No, you don't.
Seriously.
No, it's impossible." Well, that's number 1. Number 2, how can you do that when you have the other side just gonna, like, turn on you? So, you kinda have to pick your battles in those situations. Not every time you're gonna be invited to everything because of the parental alienations, but you're not gonna be all that. So, you have to figure out you have to think of it strategically. How are you gonna play this game that you're in, and how can you be a supportive role in your kids' lives? But also, how can you get yourself help? Don't just go to a therapist and just the kindness and the cuteness and all that. And I don't mean that to be rude. I know there's a bunch of therapists here, and I know I'm not saying that they're that. I'm just saying in generally, make sure you find someone that will help you grow as a person rather than just
Just be on your side saying, "Yeah,
yeah,
that's terrible."
yeah,
Well,
that's
that doesn't
yeah.
help you. That's not
No,
helping change.
no, and be honest with them and write out a plan. Like, write out a plan how you wanna get to what's your goal, what's your purpose? Because 'Cause they're there to guide you, and it may not be a therapist, it might be and don't rely on your friends. That's the first thing, don't do that.
If they're friends, you're on your side, but sometimes you need somebody who's gonna give you
Yeah.
some reality checks too.
Mm.
So yeah, I think that's really good advice when you are hiring a therapist is you need to have goals and you should know what they are. They're not their little secret. Plan them together. And if you feel like this person's not helping me, have a conversation about that. And also be willing to consider finding somebody else and don't give up on yourself or on the process of trying to heal and get the support you need. So I really
I
like
yeah.
those two things that you said because when I was like, what is your word of advice? You spoke to two things: taking care of yourself, healing, becoming the best you can, and focusing on being all there with your child and centering them. And you didn't say a word about your ex, and I think that's really important because they're not somebody you can control, nor should you try. Focus on yourself, focus on being the best parent you can, and then just accepting that the dynamic isn't ideal, but you can do the best you can within it. So great words of advice. Thank you so much for
You're
the
welcome.
conversation and for your
Yeah.
vulnerability and sharing like such painful parts of your life with everybody who's listening or who will be later when we share their recaps. I'm sure that this has been really helpful to people. I know a lot of people struggle with the same life circumstances that you have shared.
Yeah. Well, you're welcome. I mean, I think it's a more of a topic that we need to talk about more, and I
Hmm.
think we need to I mean, I love to see it where and I really think somehow or another it needs to come down to because I think it's gonna get worse, not better in our divorce, and I think we need to figure out, what are the parameters when we divorce? I think that's where we need to start with. How does that look like? What do we need to do? I think Canada has a way of doing this where they sit down and they say, okay, dollar and cents, this is, you need to, this is the law. We're going to put this in and this is how you do it. And then they kind of talk about some other things.
Mm.
But I really think that if we're going to do this right, going to court, spending all that money, $150,000, think of it.
For what?
For what? You know, it means nothing now. That could have bought a home. That could have paid a couple years of college for all my kids. That could have put, that 100, like, if I really want to talk about it, $150,000, you put that in the stock market, it could have been almost a half a, maybe $5-10 million over a period of years. I mean, just think about the waste and not just the financial side, but the financial waste or the physical waste of time, the children's waste of being a child, and they lost so much in between.
And the emotional cost of constantly fighting. Right.
Right. So I think we need to do better as a society and really like think about how we want this. I mean, divorce is going to happen,
Hmm.
but it doesn't
And
have
sometimes it needs to, and sometimes
to. Right.
it's the whole thing. But parents don't need to put their children in the center, and there are healthy ways of co-parenting that really can benefit everybody. But this is not, and sometimes you don't have the choice because the reason you're leaving the person is because they are not the healthiest. And you can't control that, but you can, like you said, you can focus on yourself and on your kids. And that's what the power is.
So, yeah.
Yeah. There's a comment here from Dr. Richard Hogan just saying, thank you for your openness. I want to make sure you saw
Well,
that.
yeah. Well, you're welcome. Thank you. Yeah. But
Well, again,
I hope one day that my message, that's really I'm really trying to do, is the more I talk about it now, I really hope it drives change.
Yeah.
And that's what my goal is. And how that looks like, I don't know yet. But the more we talk about it, the more we have these open discussions, and people are a lot more honest, because it's just not just happens to women; it also happens to men.
Mm-hmm.
And we just need to be better stewards for our children versus just, let them hang on the clothesline as darts, and that's not what we want. So, anyways, thank you for having me. I appreciate it, and thankfully, it's not my technical issues here today. I'm glad it's happening to other people. So,
thank you to everybody who came back in. I don't know if the numbers here are the same ones that were in for part one, but if you missed part one, look for the replay sometime within the week. I'll have that coming in my newsletter. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe so you get it all. Make sure you're subscribed to John Rinaldo's Positive Pen for some uplifting writing in your week. And I believe you post 3 times a week, right? So prolific.
No, it's 5 days a week until the new year, and I'll go 3 times a week. And we're going, and we do have a podcast called Soul. I forgot Soul. No, right. Oh, geez, Louise.
We'll throw it all in the.
I'm with Kaz. She's gonna hurt me now. she's gonna razz me out. Well, how did you forget about that? I don't know. I just did.
Blank. It happens. Yeah. we'll throw it all in the newsletter when you link the stories.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you, everybody. Yeah, you too.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.